Welcome back to Business Office Specialist. In today's video, we're going to be looking at something called conditional formatting. Conditional formatting is where the format of the cell changes depending on the data that's in the cell. So in our video today, we'll look at a few examples of this and you'll understand what I mean. To help us with today's video, we're going to be looking at a pre-built workbook, as we have in the past. When we're dealing with a pre-built workbook, there is a link in Canvas or in the description on this video so that you can follow along if you'd like. I'm going to click on that link, create a copy of the document or workbook called Conditional Formatting, and then move that into my boss folder so that I can keep track of it, and rename it so that the copy of is not on the title. All right, so we have several columns of data here, and we're going to use some conditional formatting to help us identify key pieces of information in this data set easily. So conditional formatting is very useful when you're dealing with lots of numbers because it's hard for our eyes to scan through a group of numbers and identify specific numbers very quickly. But it can identify colors and visual changes much faster. So conditional formatting is just there to help us identify specific pieces of information using the formatting as a key indicator for our eyes to catch attention to those specific items quickly. So let's look at an example of this. Let's start with column A. So I want to select all of the data in column A. Now I could just click and drag as we've done before all the way to the bottom of the data set. But what if I added additional rows later on? I would have to go in and change the formatting for those as well. So oftentimes when I'm dealing with a data set that I know is going to be added to in the future, instead of selecting a specific set of rows in a column, I will actually just select the entire column at once, and then any rows that are added into that column later on will get the same formatting. We can do that simply by clicking on the letter column header at the very top. So I'm going to click on the letter A, and you'll see that it highlights the entire column all the way to the bottom. Now we're going to add a conditional format. To do that, we're going to go to the Format menu at the top and select Conditional Formatting. This opens up a separate tool off to the right-hand side. We have a couple of different options for conditional formatting. We can change a single color based on criteria or use a varying scale. We'll start with a single color. Now, right here is where we have the criteria that we can select for the cell. We're going to change the fill color on this cell depending on a specific criteria. So let's, for this one, choose any numbers that are greater than 60. Let's imagine that I want to see very quickly whatever numbers are greater than 60. So I'm going to come down here and scroll until I see the greater than. And then for the value, I'm going to select 60. So any values greater than 60 are going to have this formatting style. And you can see already that anything greater than 60 is changed to green, which is the default style. I can change this if I want to by going to the fill bucket. Let's make these purple. Now, if I wanted to, I could also change different elements of the text. I could make it bold, underline, strike it through, make the text color a different color if I wanted to as well. But for now, we're just going to stick with fill colors. Now that I've changed that, I'll click Done, and that saves that conditional format. So now I've changed the fill color on these cells, but the fill color isn't connected to the cell itself like we've done in the past. It's connected to the number in the cell. So as long as the number is greater than 60, the color in that cell will be purple. But if I were to change that number to something less than 60, the color automatically goes away. If I put it back, the color returns. So the color is dependent on the value in the cell. That's why it's called conditional, because it's conditional based on whatever number's in that cell. Let's try a few others. There's a lot of criteria that we can choose to change these conditions, and that's one of the cool things about the conditional formatting. Let's do column B, and this time, instead of doing a number that's greater than something, let's do a text-based one. So I'm going to add another rule, and I want this to give me a fill color only if the numbers in this column contain the number 5 somewhere. So it could be a 50, it could be a 5 in the ones column, but somewhere in that number there's a 5. So you can use this to find anything that contains text, words, letters, or in this case, specific numbers. So I'm going to choose text contains, the value 5. And now anything with the value 5 is highlighted for me. Let's make these yellow. And then I can click Done. So that's another option for conditional formatting. I can search for things that contain specific text. Let's look at one more single color conditional formatting. So I'm going to highlight column C and add another rule. This time I would like to choose numbers that are in a specific range. So let's say any values that are between the numbers 20 and 50. So I'm going to select my rule criteria and come down to my numbers, and I'm going to choose is between. So I want to have anything that is in between the numbers 20 and 50. So anything in between that range will be selected. Now notice that these numbers are inclusive. So this will include 20 and it will include 50 and any numbers in between them. For this example, let's make these blue. Then I'm going to click Done. So there's just a few examples of different ways or different criterias that you can use to add a conditional format. And you can imagine there's many reasons in the business world where a conditional formatting can be useful to help us identify very specific pieces of information quickly. Now there's another type of conditional formatting known as a color scale. So let's take a look at how color scales could be used. Let's highlight column D and create a new conditional format rule, but this time let's go to the color scale. Color scales have varying different degrees of a single color. So depending on how high on the number scale your number is, it could darken or lighten the tone of a specific color. So in this case, the default is set to where the smaller the number is, the darker the color. The higher the number is, the lighter the color, and it goes from a dark green to a white. If we want to, we can change that by clicking on the color scale, and there's several different default color scales that are available to us. Let's make ours the other way around. Let's make it white if it's a low number, and the higher it gets, the darker the color gets for us. So we would choose white to green as our color option. And then we can click Done down at the bottom. And you can see that instead of trying to read the different numbers, now I can just glance at the color tones and know which numbers are higher and which numbers are lower. So it's kind of a comparison between the different numbers instead of looking for a specific criteria. Let's go to column E and look at one other way that you can set up a color scale. So for this one, instead of doing just one of the default colors, I want to create a custom range for these color scales. So down here below the color scale option, I have 3 different criteria: a min point, a midpoint, and a max point. So basically what we're saying here is let's pick a color for the highest, the lowest, and the middle numbers, and then it will create a color scale for me that ranges between them. So let's pretend, for example, that these are grades maybe. And I want to see very quickly where students stand with their different grades. So let's pick a low number. Instead of min value, I'm going to choose a very specific number. I want the number 60, which is a passing grade. And I'm going to change this to be red. Anything that is 60 or lower is going to be a red color. And I want that so that I can identify students that are failing. In fact, instead of 60, let's make that 59. Then that's anyone who's failing. Now the high point, let's make that number a 90. Anything a 90 or higher for me is good. That's in your A range. So I want those to be a nice solid green color. So we're going to change that to be a green. So now anything with an A or higher, a 90 or higher, is going to be a bright green color. And then the lower their grade goes, the darker that green tone is going to get. Now in the midpoint, let's change that number as well, and let's say 70. That's fine. Anything that's a 70 or lower, I want to show in yellow. So now you've got 90's your green color, so that's your passing scores. 59 or lower, your failing scores are going to be red. And then each of those colors is going to work their way towards yellow as they're meeting in the middle. So the lower your score gets, you're going to move from green to more of a yellow tone, and then from the yellow into a red tone. And then the higher your grade gets, you're going to move out of reds into your oranges, up to your yellow, and then out of your yellow into a green. So it gives you kind of this scale to work with that shows you the changes in those colors as you're working through very specific numbers. So it's a great way for someone who's looking for groups of numbers, like a teacher looking at grades, to identify very quickly through colors what students are doing well, what students are at risk to fail, and what students are failing, so that just by glancing at colors, you know where each student stands. So that's the value of a conditional format, and a few examples of how those could be used. Now you have a chance to practice some of them on your own, and we're going to do a fun activity to do that. If you click on the next worksheet called Paint by Number, you're going to find a large grid of numbers. Inside of these numbers is hidden an image that you're going to bring out using conditional formats. So what we want to do is create a conditional formatting rule that applies to the entire worksheet at once. So we want to select the whole worksheet. You could click Control A and select all, just like you would in Google Docs. There's another way that you can do it as well. In the corner, the upper left corner, to the left of the A column and just above the first row, is a blank square. If you click your mouse on that square, it will automatically select the entire workbook. So we're going to do that right at the beginning. And then every conditional format rule you create in this worksheet will be created for the entire worksheet. And slowly, this image is going to appear as you paint the different cells using conditional formatting. So if you're viewing this through my Canvas course, there are instructions below the video that will walk you through each of the 5 colors and the criteria for the conditional formatting in order for those colors to show up. Please do them in the exact order that they're in Canvas so that the numbers and the colors show up correctly. If you're viewing this through YouTube, the 5 criteria for the conditional formatting for the paint by number will be in the description below the video.
To learn more tools and features in the Google Suite family of apps, check out more of my videos on YouTube or visit ToriNorman.com.